Hey guys, tonight we follow a fragile, yellowed map that's landed in your hands, almost by accident, fluttering in the autumn wind outside your window. You probably won't survive this if you insist on scoffing at the obvious warnings scribbled along its margins, but that's part of the fun, isn't it? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead, I'll wait. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. We'll see if anyone else is braving this with me tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You unfold the map. The paper brittle, edges curling like the fingers of someone whispering secrets behind a locked door. Its lines are indecipherable at first, looping and crossing like a tangle of restless snakes. And yet a pattern slowly emerges. A path to a tower, high on a crag that seems almost to float above the forest canopy. The air smells faintly of rain and old ink, and as you trace the route with your finger, you hear the distant crunch of leaves under shoes that aren't yours. Did someone or something leave this here deliberately? Historians still argue whether maps in medieval Europe were meant more to inspire exploration or terror, but you don't have time for debate. You have to decide, do you follow it? Your first step toward the tower is cautious, almost ceremonial, and the ground beneath your boots gives a faint groan, like it remembers every traveler who ever dared the same. You pause, squinting at the horizon. A crow circles above, black against the bruised sky, and it caws. A single sharp reminder that nature itself may be testing your resolve. You shiver, not entirely from the cool wind, but from the thrill and the creeping notion that this is no ordinary journey. There's a footnote scribbled in your mind. The Alchemist's tower is rumored to be older than the kingdom itself, a relic left behind by a man obsessed with turning knowledge into gold. Fringe researchers whisper that he might have discovered something beyond human reckoning, though mainstream historians are more skeptical, arguing whether he ever bore than a laboratory of curious oddities. As you approach the forest's edge, your senses tingle. Moss clings to the trunks, wet and slippery under your fingers. The wind carries scents of mushrooms, damp earth, and a hint of sulfur that makes you wrinkle your nose. It's the smell of possibility, or maybe danger. You remember that time you read about crocodile dung sunscreen in ancient Egypt and laugh softly. It feels weirdly comforting to know humans have always mixed genius with questionable judgment. The trees lean closer as if watching, their gnarled branches like arthritic hands pointing the way. Every step crunches in rhythm with your heartbeat, and every snap of a twig makes you imagine a secret observer hiding just beyond your vision. You tell yourself it's probably nothing, but the uneasy thrill doesn't leave. The map seems to pulse under your palm, not with magic, of course. At least that's what your rational brain insists, but with the promise of discovery. Shadows lengthen, and the path narrows. You see stones etched with tiny, almost imperceptible symbols, so faint you almost doubt their existence. Could they be the alchemist's own markers? Maybe instructions meant for the daring, the foolish, or the lucky. Historians still argue whether medieval alchemists embedded cryptic messages in landscapes to protect their secrets or merely to amuse themselves, but you have no choice but to follow, mapping each oddity in your mind. A leaf flutters down, landing perfectly on a symbol, a sun encircled by a serpent. You blink. The forest seems to exhale around you, and you realize the journey has officially begun. The light wanes as you trudge forward, and the first whispers reach your ears, soft like wind through hollow bones. Maybe it's the map's magic, or maybe the tower itself is waking. You stumble over roots that feel intentionally placed, like someone wanted to slow you down, test your resolve. Your pulse quickens, the air thickens. And then, just as the last golden rays of sun touch the treetops, the first glimpse of the tower comes into view. a silhouette against a bleeding sky, crooked and impossibly tall, with windows like staring eyes. You inhale sharply. This is it. You've crossed from the world you knew into the alchemist's realm. The forest swallows you whole as you step off the beaten path, and immediately the air thickens with dampness and something else you can't quite name. Your boots sink slightly into moss that seems too soft to be natural, and every step forward is a negotiation with roots that curl like sleeping serpents. A fog begins to rise, curling around tree trunks, making the forest feel like a place out of a dream, or a slightly menacing bedtime story. You hear a distant splash, maybe a brook, or maybe something less explainable, and it sends a shiver down your spine. Historians still argue whether medieval forests were deliberately left wild to instill fear in travelers, or if it was just the result of inefficient land management. But tonight, the forest feels very purposeful, very alive, and very much aware of your intrusion. You stumble over a fallen log, brushing against bark that leaves faint green stains on your fingers, and realize that your sense of direction has already begun to fray. A crow caws from somewhere above, louder this time, and a squirrel with unusually bright eyes watches you from a high branch. Fringe lore claims certain animals were thought to guard mystical paths, their eyes reflecting truths humans were not meant to see. You glance back and notice a shadow moving between the trees. Was it a trick of the fog, or something following your every move? Your rational mind insists it's probably just another squirrel, but a gnawing part of you can't ignore the possibility that the forest itself is testing you. The deeper you go, the more the air hums with faint, almost musical vibrations. Leaves whisper in a tongue that seems almost familiar, and you swear you can make out words if you focus too hard. Remember that time you learned about medieval herbalists using chants to encourage plant growth? The echo of it now feels eerily appropriate. Somewhere beneath the fog, roots twist like veins, and occasionally you feel the brush of something against your ankle. Nothing tangible, but enough to make you keep moving faster, heart hammering. You trip over a rock and land on damp earth, catching sight of tiny carvings, an eye surrounded by a spiral. You can't tell if it's a warning or a guide. As twilight deepens, the forest transforms. Shadows stretch into impossible angles, branches curl overhead like cathedral arches, and the fog thickens until it almost has texture. You pause to listen. A faint rustle, a low sigh, and then unmistakably a voice, or maybe two, whispering, "Welcome, seeker." Your pulse skips. Fringe historians suggest that some alchemists trained animals, and even elements of their surroundings to recognize outsiders, but skeptics scoff, arguing that many haunted forests are just products of overactive imaginations. You laugh softly to yourself, even though it's a nervous laugh, and remind yourself that if an ancient, enchanted forest exists, it probably doesn't have a Yelp rating. You notice an abandoned campfire off the path, stones blackened, ashes cold, but somehow arranged in a strange geometric pattern. Could this have been left by another traveler, or the alchemist himself, testing your instincts? Historians still argue whether medieval alchemists were more theatrical than practical, performing elaborate rituals simply to impress visitors, and you begin to suspect this forest is one of those tests. A gust of wind carries the smell of sulfur mixed with pine sap, and for a moment you can't tell if it's an olfactory hallucination or a genuine warning. You press onward, following the faint trail the map promised, feeling the forest's grip tighten with every step. Branches snag your coat, twigs snap underfoot, and the ground occasionally drops into small hollows that make you stumble forward like a novice tightrope walker. Somewhere off to your left, the fog parts briefly, revealing a glimpse of the tower's peak, crooked against the fading light. The sight both terrifies and exhilarates you. Fringe alchemical texts suggest towers were intentionally designed to appear unreachable, to dissuade all but the most determined seekers. You chuckle, So much for discouragement. As the sun finally dips below the horizon, the forest exhales, shadows pooling around your legs like liquid, and you realize that crossing this place is less about distance and more about endurance, perception, and a willingness to embrace the strange. By the time you reach a small clearing, the last light has vanished, leaving only the tower's silhouette cutting a jagged line against the night sky. The fog thins here, replaced by a faint, almost electric tension. You can feel the map thrum in your hands as if it shares your anticipation. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snaps, not by your movement, and you swear the forest is holding its breath, waiting to see what you will do next. Your boots are wet, your hands smeared with moss, and yet there's no turning back. The tower awaits, crooked and secretive, promising wonders and warnings in equal measure. You step forward, inhaling sharply, fully aware that whatever lies ahead, the forest has already tested your courage. The tower looms closer now, its crooked silhouette sharper in the moonlight, and you can feel the weight of every step pressing against the soles of your boots. The front door is massive, old oak reinforced with iron, and it squeaks in protest as you push it open. A faint scent of ozone and powdered herbs wafts out, curling around your nose like an invitation or a warning. You step inside, and the first thing you notice is the labyrinthine nature of the rooms. Doors at odd angles, staircases that twist impossibly, and floors that slope in ways that seem designed to confuse. Historians still argue whether medieval alchemists deliberately designed their labs to disorient visitors, or if poor architectural planning just made everything look chaotic. Either way, you feel a thrill of anticipation, your pulse picking up with each hesitant step. The first room you enter is filled with shelves stacked haphazardly with jars, vials, and small metal boxes. Some shimmer with powders that glow faintly in the dim light, while others release wisps of vapor that smell faintly of burnt sugar and almonds. You remember that time you read about Paracelsus, the Renaissance alchemist who experimented with mercury and other dangerous elements. This feels like a living echo of that madness, a place where curiosity and peril coexist. A small contraption on a table whirs suddenly, spinning gears that clink in an oddly musical rhythm. You step back, heart racing, realizing you're not just exploring, you're part of an experiment you never agreed to, at least not consciously. As you move deeper, the rooms become increasingly intricate. Locked cabinets with carved symbols block your path, some with keyholes shaped like stars or crescent moons. You find yourself tracing the symbols with your fingers, noticing patterns in the carvings that suggest logic, or perhaps misdirection. Fringe lore holds that some alchemists encoded their greatest discoveries in puzzles that could only be solved by the truly devoted. You pause at a door etched with a serpent entwined around a sunburst. The metal handle feels unnaturally warm under your palm, and you hesitate. Historians still argue whether symbols like these were meant as protective charms or simply vanity, but you don't have the luxury of debating. You have to turn the handle. Opening the door reveals a chamber filled with mechanical devices, delicate and intimidating. Levers, pulleys, and spinning wheels dominate the space, all seemingly connected, yet none following a pattern you can immediately understand. You spot a small platform that rises and falls on its own, depth as if obeying some invisible rhythm. Mechanical birds perched along the shelves twitch their wings sporadically, as though testing your attention. You can't help but smile, remembering the automata of Renaissance Europe, which were designed to mimic life so convincingly that people often believed they were enchanted. Fringe researchers argue that these devices were a bridge between science and spectacle, a testament to human ingenuity or vanity, depending on who's speaking. The next corridor twists sharply, the walls lined with faded tapestries depicting alchemical scenes. A man dissolving metals, a phoenix rising from ashes, strange creatures half human, half animal. The air hums faintly, and every sound you make echoes like it's being absorbed and repeated by the building itself. A gust of wind, or maybe a breath from the tower, sends a loose page fluttering across the floor. It lands at your feet, revealing a diagram you can barely decipher, overlapping circles, arrows, and cryptic annotations. You kneel, brushing the dust off, feeling an odd kinship with the unknown author who once stared at this very paper, likely wondering if anyone would ever solve it. Staircases twist upward and downward in a way that seems impossible. You climb a narrow spiral, gripping the cold stone railing, and find yourself in a room that smells faintly of old parchment and burning herbs. The walls are lined with cabinets, some open to reveal tiny, delicate instruments, others sealed shut with locks that appear centuries old. You notice a small, ornate box at eye level. Inside, a scroll unfolds, revealing intricate diagrams of celestial alignments, chemical reactions, and a page filled with notes in a hurried hand. Historians still argue whether such writings were practical manuals or more of a philosophical exercise in the nature of matter and spirit. Either way, it's mesmerizing, and you can't resist tracing the lines with your fingertip, imagining the hands that wrote them, trembling with excitement or fear. A faint creak behind you makes you turn. Shadows stretch across the walls, and you swear one of the cabinet doors shifted on its own. Maybe it's the tower settling, or maybe the place has a life of its own. Mechanical gears whir in distant rooms, and somewhere a vial shivers as though it senses your presence. You pause to consider every puzzle, every locked door, every faint whisper of sound. This is all part of the alchemist's labyrinth. And if you survive it, you might just earn a glimpse at knowledge no living person was meant to hold. With a deep breath, you step forward, fully aware that every choice here, every touch, every glance, could lead you closer to revelation, or deeper into confusion. The next room hums with an almost tangible energy, and you realize you've entered the heart of the alchemist's experiments. Shelves are crowded with vials and flasks, some bubbling gently, others glowing with colors you can't name, liquid rainbows trapped behind glass. The air smells faintly of sulfur and honey, a combination that makes your head spin in an oddly pleasant way. You lean closer, reading the faded labels: elixir of insight, powder of dreams, essence of midnight. Fringe scholars claim some of these concoctions were meant to alter perception rather than matter, while skeptics insist it's all the flamboyant marketing of a man obsessed with mystery. Historians still argue whether alchemists were proto-chemists in pursuit of truth or theatrical charlatans. And as you reach for a glowing vial, the question feels suddenly less abstract and much more urgent. You pause to study a notebook lying open on a small table. Its pages are dense with tiny handwriting, sketches of strange apparatus, and diagrams you can barely make sense of. One entry suggests that the alchemists tried to combine the essence of night with distilled moonlight to create a formula for longevity. You chuckle softly, imagining the ingredients: moonbeams, a pinch of stardust, and apparently the patience of a saint. The air around you vibrates faintly, as though acknowledging your amusement, and for a moment you feel a strange kinship with the absent alchemist, a mix of admiration, curiosity, and mild unease. You remember reading about the legendary experiments of alchemists in 16th century Europe, who sometimes risked blindness or poisoning in their pursuit of gold or eternal life. Somehow, standing here, you feel their reckless genius coursing through the room. Across the chamber, a series of intricate machines clatter softly as though on their own timetable. Gears turn, levers lift and drop, and a tiny mechanical bird flutters along the track, stopping to peck at a vial that emits a soft green glow. You watch, fascinated, and can't help but recall the automata of Renaissance courts. Delicate machines that imitated life, meant to impress visitors and blur the line between magic and engineering. Fringe historians suggest some devices even contained rudimentary chemical reactions, hinting that their creators understood more than the surface spectacle. Here, though, the devices seem alive, almost sentient, nudging you forward with soft mechanical clicks. A faint draft carries the smell of burnt herbs, and your eyes are drawn to a corner of the room where a large cauldron bubbles with a liquid so black it seems to swallow the surrounding light. Small sparks flick across its surface, and you hear what sounds like whispers rising from the froth. You step closer, mesmerized, and catch a fleeting glimpse of something shimmering at the bottom, perhaps a note, or perhaps a trick of reflection. You remind yourself that alchemists often use theatrical effects to disguise mundane experiments, but your pulse quickens anyway. Fringe lore claims some potions were deliberately enchanted with subtle sound or light illusions, meant to keep intruders cautious and respectful. You laugh softly at the thought that centuries later, you're exactly the intended audience, shivering with a mixture of fear and delight. You wander past shelves filled with powders and flasks, some tagged in languages you don't recognize. One vial contains a silvery dust that seems to move as if alive, and you're momentarily hypnotized, remembering that strange alchemical claim you read once. Powdered silver could absorb the essence of a person standing nearby. You shake your head, chuckling. Maybe it's just the low light playing tricks on you. The tower hums around you, gears and flasks in quiet chorus, and for a moment, you forget everything else. Time, the map, even the forest that brought you here. The only thing real is the pulsing energy of discovery, the intoxicating scent of knowledge literally brewing before your eyes. Near the back of the room, you find a small desk stacked with journals and scraps of paper. A particular notebook catches your eye, its cover embossed with a serpent eating its own tail. You flip it open and are immediately immersed in meticulous observations. Formulas for liquids that supposedly reveal the future, powders that glimmer under moonlight, and notes on the properties of gemstones. Historians still debate whether these writings were meant as practical guides or philosophical thought experiments, but here, under the soft hum of the tower, they feel urgent, almost alive. You trace a finger across one diagram, imagining the meticulous care and the occasional desperation that must have accompanied every experiment. Somewhere between genius and madness, the alchemist left pieces of himself scattered across the room, waiting for someone daring enough to follow. A faint chime catches your attention, and your gaze shifts to a small vial on a spinning stand. Its contents swirl with iridescent colors, and a soft voice, maybe imagined, maybe real, seems to murmur possibilities and fears you didn't know you had. You laugh nervously, remembering the mechanical birds and the moving powders. All of this, you whisper to yourself, and they still couldn't keep a normal light switch. The combination of humor and awe steadies you. You realize that you are part of a centuries-old experiment, not just observing, but participating. Every step you take, every vial you touch, is a small dance with history, curiosity, and the unknown. And somewhere beneath the bubbling cauldrons and spinning wheels, the map pulses, guiding you closer to the revelation that has drawn countless seekers before you, and will draw many more after. You follow the map deeper into the tower, every step carrying the weight of anticipation, and finally, it guides you to a hidden chamber tucked behind a false wall. The air here is warmer, tinged with the scent of aged parchment and faint smoke, as though the room itself remembers countless experiments. A single, dim lantern flickers on a stand, revealing a pedestal at the center, and on it, a map unlike any you've seen before. Its surface shimmers subtly, lines and symbols shifting like liquid, almost aware of your gaze. Fringe historians suggest some alchemists attempted to encode knowledge in self-updating charts, but skeptics insist it was merely the clever use of reflective surfaces and layered inks. Either way, the revelation here feels alive. You step closer, your fingers hovering above the map, hesitant. It hums faintly beneath your touch, resonating with something deep inside you, something you didn't know you carried. Curiosity, fear, and the tiniest spark of wonder that drew you here in the first place. The symbols on the map seem to rearrange themselves into instructions, pointing not to treasures or gold, but to questions. Ethical, philosophical, even metaphysical. One line suggests that the tower itself is a repository of accumulated knowledge, a living archive that chooses whom to reward with insight. You remember reading that some Renaissance alchemists believed their work could influence fate itself, though historians still argue whether this was metaphorical or taken literally. The chamber is silent except for the faint hum of the map and the subtle creak of the floorboards. You notice a small chest tucked into a corner, unlocked but seemingly invisible until you peer closely. Opening it reveals vials of strange powders and crystalline fragments, each more mesmerizing than the last. A few shimmer with shifting colors that seem almost alive, reacting to the light of the lantern and your very presence. Fringe researchers have long speculated that alchemists experimented with substances meant to reflect the soul's state, or even alter perception temporarily. You carefully examine one vial, watching the colors swirl as though whispering secrets about time, mortality, and hidden truths. Your attention is drawn back to the map, which now pulses brighter. Lines lead from the chamber to a distant part of the tower, spiraling upward through rooms you've already traversed. Following the path with your finger, you realize it traces not a route, but a sequence of discoveries, a puzzle meant to challenge your perception and patience. You feel a momentary pang of regret. What if you've missed a critical clue along the way? But then a soft glow emits from the map, as if reassuring you. The revelation is not just about physical location. It's about understanding, seeing beyond the obvious, connecting threads you didn't know existed. You chuckle softly, remembering the mechanical birds and moving powders from earlier. Everything in this tower has been teaching you to observe, to question, to perceive. As you stand there, absorbing the layers of insight, a hidden compartment clicks open in the pedestal. Inside lies a single small book, bound in worn leather. Opening it reveals pages filled with notes, diagrams, and reflections that seem almost alive. Some passages argue about the nature of reality itself, while others speculate on the moral implications of knowledge. Fringe scholars debate whether these writings were meant for self-reflection or for guiding others, and you realize the distinction no longer matters. This book, combined with the map, is the culmination of centuries of inquiry. You can feel the weight of countless hands that reached for it before you, some for wisdom, others for vanity, and a few simply out of reckless curiosity. The final revelation settles in slowly, like a warm tide washing over your thoughts. The tower, the experiments, the map, it was never about gold, immortality, or even the powders and vials. It was about exploration itself, about curiosity as a living, breathing entity that tests, teases, and transforms those brave enough to follow it. You step back, taking a deep breath, and realize that you have earned more than knowledge. You have earned perspective, the rare understanding that discovery is as much about the journey as it is about the destination. With a mixture of relief and awe, you trace your finger across the map one last time, feeling its pulse sync with your own heartbeat. And for a moment, you're certain that the tower itself smiles in approval, or perhaps amusement, at your presence. The tower is quiet now, the hum of hidden mechanisms softened to a gentle murmur that barely brushes your ears. You sit on the cold stone floor, letting the weight of the journey settle around you. The map lies open on your lap. Its shifting lines now calm, almost meditative, and you can feel a faint warmth radiating from it, as though the tower itself is breathing with you. Outside, the forest seems distant, softened by night, leaves whispering a lullaby you can almost understand. Your pulse slows, and for the first time since stepping into the twisted halls and hidden chambers, You feel entirely present in the moment, the excitement and tension giving way to quiet reflection. You run a hand over the journals and vials, noting their textures, smooth glass, brittle paper, and powders that shimmer faintly even in dim light. Each object seems to carry its own memory, a tiny story of the hands that created it, of experiments begun and left unfinished. Even the mechanical birds, now still, seem to have settled into a silent watch over the room, guardians of centuries of curiosity. You imagine the alchemist's presence here, not as a figure of authority or intimidation, but as a companion for the inquisitive mind, leaving behind these traces as a gentle encouragement. Explore, learn, question, but always with reverence and patience. The air is cool and slightly scented with herbs, a reminder that the world outside still exists, calm and ordinary. Your thoughts drift lazily across the sequence of rooms you traversed, the foggy forest, the twisting staircases, the mechanical marvels, and the swirling potions. Each memory seems softer now, less urgent, as though the tower itself has decided to let you rest, to release you from the thrill and tension of discovery. Fringe ideas and historical debates you encountered along the way, whether alchemists sought gold, immortality, or philosophical insight, now settle in your mind like comfortable cushions, thoughts to ponder without pressure or hurry. The map's glow dims slowly, fading to a gentle shimmer that mirrors the soft rhythm of your own breathing. You close your eyes briefly, savoring the quiet, imagining that the towers, the rooms, and the secrets within are all breathing softly with you. Outside, the forest night hums with gentle life, the whisper of wind and distant rustle of leaves echoing the heartbeat of your own calm. You feel connected not just to the tower, but to every seeker who has ever traced paths in search of knowledge, and even those who will come after you, drawn by curiosity as unrelenting and tender as the night itself. Finally, you rise, stretching slowly, allowing your gaze to linger on the map and journals one last time. The tower does not demand more. It merely waits, patient and knowing. You step toward the door, each movement deliberate, savoring the lingering warmth and hum. And as you exit, the cool night air greets you gently, carrying with it the scent of moss, earth, and distant flame. The journey may be over for now, but the map, the tower, and the alchemist's legacy remain within you, a quiet pulse of curiosity and wonder, ready to awaken whenever you are ready to follow it again.